Very good afternoon to all of you. I trust all of you are having a good time at TC this year. My name is Eunice, and I'm a media solutions consultant from Singapore. So it's a long way here. Still dealing with jet lag. It's about time to sleep now in Singapore. So regretfully, we're supposed to have Emily Fur from Booking.com for the original session for EVP Without Borders, but she's not feeling well. But we're still glad to welcome all of you here for this afternoon session on leading breakthrough performance in the new world of work. So our speaker today has been constantly rated as top speaker at major events and conferences. She has 25 years of experience leading human resources and talent acquisition efforts. She studied industry's best practices and partnered with senior executives to improve their skills and increase their impact. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome on stage Unbridled Talent CEO, Jennifer McClure.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. Hopefully you're all in the session, right? Wouldn't it be great if I had all of the energy and enthusiasm of Cynthia Marshall earlier today and I had you up dancing and everything and no one would know that we had such a great time in here. But we are going to have a great time, and hopefully I'm going to leave some time available for you to ask questions. We have a group size that's going to be really good for asking questions and maybe having some dialogue, or maybe we'll even do something at your table. So I thank you for coming to join me to talk about the future of HR and talent, really. I started my career in 1988 in a job that at the time was called personnel. Does anybody remember when it was in personnel? A couple of you. When I started, I actually chose to go to work in personnel because I didn't really have any goals to do anything else. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just went to college because that was the thing to do, and they told me I had to pick a major, and they didn't have a major in personnel, so I said, how about management? And they said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be in personnel because I felt like that was a place in the organization. In my millennial brain in 1988, if that was even a thing, I felt like being in personnel was the place in the organization where I could have the most influence and impact. And I can tell you 30-something years later, I still feel like that was the right decision. And I feel like I had a little bit of premonition into, again, the opportunity to deal with people, which now more so than ever are the most important part of any organization, was a great place to be, and I still think it is. So if you work in HR or learning and development or recruiting, any of those roles, you're dealing with people. You have the opportunity to make a huge difference in any organization. So in 1988, when I was in my first day in my first real job in human resources, we'll just call it that, I sat there on that day in my office, which was strategically placed in between the men's and women's restroom in a hallway where it was just my office and the bathroom. So what a great place to be, to see everybody multiple times a day. And I was sitting there that day at 21 years old thinking I had already achieved all of my hopes and dreams. I had wanted someone to pay me $18,000. That was the goal I set out there, which was a stretch goal. And this company was actually going to pay me $18,000. So I was done. That was it. I've hit the pinnacle of, that was more than my dad made as a college professor at the time. And I also wanted, because again, being a millennial before millennials were cool, I wanted a fancy job title because, you know, that's important. We're talking about important career stuff. And I was going to be the personnel manager / shipping and receiving manager. That is super impressive and looks really good on a business card, right? And I had never been in a manufacturing plant in my life, but I had talked these people into hiring me into this role where I would have 8 people to supervise in shipping and receiving in a warehouse environment, and I learned all the things immediately. Forklift trainer and had to teach people something I didn't even know what it was, but that's what it was like to be excited about the opportunity to come into the organization and have an impact. So I can tell you again, 30 years later, I never would have thought about all the strategic and business critical things that I would get to do because I chose human resources and talent as my career. I never could have thought about the times that I would be collecting dimes out of the feminine hygiene machines in the women's restroom because the HR can handle that. Or the times that people would be lined up at my desk to ask questions and telling me they need my help because the copy machine was broken, and of course, HR can help with that. Or the times that I planned picnics and parties with the help of my team, and we made sure that I had all the right things going on, and the next day knowing people would be lined up outside my office door to not thank us for what we had done for the event, but to complain because we had chocolate cake instead of vanilla, or because they wanted hot dogs and there were only hamburgers. You guys know what that's like, even if you're in recruiting, right? And then, of course, there were the times that I would sit across from employees in really in-depth conversations, getting to know them, or they're yelling and screaming at me, telling me that I don't care about them or their families because despite the 72 reminders I had sent about open enrollment, they had not signed their family up for benefits. And of course, HR is responsible for that in their mind. So now on that first day and my first real job in human resources in 1988, I never could have thought about all of the opportunities that I would difference in the business, but I can tell you that I had a lot more fun than just those things. But we all know there are people out there that don't think today that HR has a place in the organization or even recruiting. There are people out there that advocate for hiring managers to be the ones that do it all, right? The hiring managers should be responsible for hiring their people. The hiring managers should be responsible for dealing with all their employee issues. And we know that they should, but they often need a little bit of help. So when people tell me that they don't think that HR is actually necessary, I always like to remind them, this is just one survey that's done every year by the conference board. And it's one of many surveys out there where if you look at those surveys where they're asking either, in this case, global CEOs or global leaders, the number one issues that are mentioned by those global leaders or CEOs as the biggest challenges facing their business are people related. So remember in 1988 when I said I want to be in the seat in the organization where I can have the most influence and impact? If you look at the results for the last 7 years of this conference board survey, that is exactly the seat to be in. So if human capital is the biggest challenge facing businesses and organizations today, it's what's keeping your C-level leaders up at night, then there's no better people than those of you in this room, and it's just these people in this room, not everybody else at this conference, who have the opportunity to really make a difference in their organization. And since most of you are probably in talent acquisition, you know you are on the front lines of these talent challenges, right? Whether it's getting the right people into the organization or finding the skills and the qualifications that you need, or making sure that you have leaders to be into the next level of leadership in your organization, you are at the heart of the matter. So whether it's HR, learning and development, recruiting, talent acquisition, we are all on the front lines of making sure that this problem gets solved. So I fundamentally believe with all of my heart, and I say this with no irony whatsoever, I believe you are the most important employee in the organization. So you should step into that. When you go back to your office next week, when you go back to work, you've learned all the stuff at Talent Connect, the only thing that really matters is that you learned that you are the most important employee in the organization. So what does that mean? You need a pay raise. So you need to go to your boss, maybe don't even go to your boss, go straight to the CEO and say, hey, your number one problem keeping you awake at night is people, right? And they go, yeah. And you say, I'm the people expert, I'm here, I need to be compensated accordingly. And I want you to tell me how that went, because I've yet to get a success story. I think people are just quiet. I'm sure somebody out there has done it. But you truly are, with all irony aside, you have the ability to make such an impact on the organization in your role. You are the most important employee in the organization. You don't have to be the CHRO or the VP of Talent Acquisition. If you're a recruiter who's new to your role or someone who's been doing the job for 10 years, the fact that you are identifying people with the right skills at the right price, at the right place, at the right time to bring into your organization, you're doing the most important job out there, I believe. Now, because of the importance of your role, there are obviously some challenges that we will face in order to really achieve the success of the most important employee in the organization. And so I'm going to lay out 4 of those challenges. And again, it doesn't matter what your role is or what level it is in the organization. I believe you can step into these challenges and make a huge difference in your business. The first challenge is to know the business. Now, we've been hearing for years, business acumen is really important. We need to understand profit and loss and how the business makes money and know how you affect the bottom line of the organization. And that's very, very important. The business plan and understanding how we make money is super important. But what I am saying when I say understand and know your business is the data and the information that you have available to you regarding that most important resource, the humans that are either coming into your organization, are already there, or even those that have left. So you know, because you're here at LinkedIn Talent Connect, and you probably use the LinkedIn Talent Solution suite in some way to use the data that's available to you, it can be so powerful to you in both helping to understand the problems that your organization faces or identifying opportunities that are out there for you to take advantage of. An example that I like to share is of a large financial services company that a few years ago was hiring thousands of entry-level people into their organization every year. They still are, but a couple of years ago, they were hiring thousands of people into their organization every year, typically recent college graduates, and they had very specific hiring criteria for the people that they would even interview to go into their college admissions program, which many of you are probably have similar at your company. And their top 3 criteria, the must-haves for any candidate that they would interview, is every candidate must have at least a 3.5 grade point average. They must have stellar references, and they must have graduated from certain schools. So this organization only recruited from certain schools, only people with grades point averages of 3.5 or better, and then once they checked their references, which I'm sure were the ones the person gave to them, they had to say good things about them. But this was not working for the organization. They were not seeing people that were actually staying in the position long term, and they were not finding people that were actually a good fit for the organization. So when you think about thousands of people that are hired every year, if hundreds of those are not working out, obviously that's a huge cost to the organization. So this company engaged Deloitte, obviously a large consulting firm, to come in and really dig deep and analyze the people that had not only been hired into the organization, but the people that had also left the organization who were not successful. So they wanted to see if there were any correlating success factors for people who came into the role that were successful, well as correlating success factors for maybe people who didn't stay and weren't successful. Now, you don't have to be a large financial services company, although some of you probably do work for large employers. You could do this in your own organization. What are the success factors that are common for people who are successful in the key roles that you hire for? Or what are the successful factors for people who are just people who are actually a good fit for your company and the type of work that you do, the culture that you have? And then are there some things that are in common with people who don't stay with the organization, who leave? And in this case, after Deloitte analyzed thousands of applications and resumes of people who had been hired and people who had left and people who were successful in the organization, they came back with 5 correlating success factors for people who came into the organization, stayed with the company, or began to move on up into the organization. And so one was that they could succeed with vague instruction. One was there was no grammatical errors or typos on their resume. Now, you probably wouldn't be able to hire anybody in today's world if that's the case, but that was at least something that the data showed was something that the people who were successful had in common. But the one that really stuck out was what they found as a correlating success factor for people who were hired into the organization and stayed and were successful was that they had prior experience in real estate sales or automotive sales. Now remember, these are financial services people on the phone calling you, trying to see if you'll invest your thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars with them. And so often it's a phone call that generates that kind of relationship. So if you think about it, let's think about an automotive salesperson. We all have, an opinion of, kind of a preconceived idea of what the used car salesman is, right? So good used car salesmen are the people that when you go onto that lot and you're trying to avoid them are actually able to gain your trust, to build rapport, because you're ultimately going to be making one of the biggest financial decisions of your life in terms of purchasing a car, right? So it will make sense that if we need to get people who can, on the phone, get people to immediately trust them, build rapport, the car salesman would be a good person to think about. But they'd never thought about that before until they looked at the data. Same thing with a real estate person. You're typically estate person for maybe days or for months while you're looking for a car. So they have to get you to trust them. They have to get you to understand that they have your best interest at heart. And again, you're making probably the largest financial decision of your life with that person. So the fact that the organization now could say, hey, maybe it's not about going and getting new recent college grads. Maybe we should be looking at a pipeline of people who are coming from real estate or automotive backgrounds. That's something that they could say could actually correlate with success. Now, what was also interesting with the Deloitte data, remember they were going to see what was not correlation of success, people who had left the company, and those that had stayed, what were the things that they could not point to was something was consistent amongst everybody. And they actually came back with 3 things that were not consistent with success in the organization. You guys have any idea what those were? GPA, where they went to school, and the quality of their references. So how many things in your organization are kind of those sacred cows, the things that we don't touch, or the things that we aren't even thinking need to be changed because either things are difficult and we say it's because of the economy, or it's because we don't have the skills out there, or there's a skills or talent shortage. There are lots of things that could be affecting that, but have you ever really taken the opportunity to dive into the data to see if you can do something like that? Now we sit on a mountain of data when it comes to the people in our organization. The first step you should be thinking about is to look at the guy who wants to check your microphone and see if you can help him with it. So you'll let him go ahead while you just keep talking. What I want you to think about is how can you tell stories with data? When there's a problem or an opportunity in your organization, what are the stories that the data is telling us? So it's not going to do that anymore. We're going to trust. But what are the stories that the data are telling you? So instead of thinking about just charts and graphs and dashboards and the things that we often think about, when you look at your dashboard or when you're printing to share with your leadership or your managers, what is the story that is being told? Or what is the story that you want to tell? What data do you need to collect so that you can tell a story to take advantage of an opportunity or to avoid a problem in your organization? So think about the story that you can tell with data. We see out there things like we know that data scientists and people like that are the jobs that are most popular now and into the future. So understanding how important it is for you and the HR and recruiting teams to be able to analyze and tell stories with data is critical to your most important role in the organization. So you may work in an organization of a size that you are able to have data scientists or people on your team to really dig into the data. If not, maybe you do need to engage a consultant. Or in my past, I worked in a small organization. We had a problem that needed to be solved. It was not my area of expertise. I talked with the CEO about it, and he said, go out and hire the best person that you can get for the role. And I did, and we ultimately saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars because we made the business case for spending the money to hire someone at $45,000 in order to understand and solve a problem that costs so much more. So understand how to make a business case, understand how to tell stories with data, because data is where you have the opportunity to have impact. I love the quote from Seth Godin, an author and marketer who's out there, who basically says, if you're measuring something and you're not using that information to make decisions or to do something different, then why are you even measuring it? So when you think about, I ask often in large groups like this, what are some of the charts and things that we report on in HR? And it's often turnover is the first thing that's mentioned, or attendance, or cost per hire. Those are some of the typical metrics that we have in HR and recruiting. But if you think about it, those are all backwards looking measurements, right? And we don't typically make moves or decisions until the trend line goes up for a very long time or goes down for a very long time. In other words, it has to go the wrong direction for weeks, days, months, years before we make decisions. The future and the challenge for us in the future is to think about what data can we collect so that we can make decisions about what to do next. not what can we sit back and wait and watch and see what happens. We have a reputation for being reactive rather than proactive. And we need to change that by thinking there are both problems that we are facing today or that we know our organization is going to face in the future, things like talent shortages, skills gaps, but there are also potential opportunities out there for us to take advantage of. Maybe it's where we locate a new location or where we recruit talent from. What is the data that we can use in order to understand that so that we can get ahead of the decisions and, again, really live up to that, solving the most important problems in the organization? The second thing is I want you to think strategically. So it's common out there to say, well, I'm a strategic recruiting professional or I'm a strategic HR leader. And I often think that we don't know what we're saying when we're saying that. I always ask somebody, when you say you're a strategic talent acquisition professional, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I want to hear what they tell me, because what it ultimately means is that you are not worried about whether you sit at a certain table or where you are on an organization chart. Strategic people in the business think about the business needs first. It's very easy for us to think about recruiting, because that's what we do. But are you thinking about the biggest problems that the business faces and how recruiting, talent acquisition, human resources can help deliver upon that? Too often, too many leaders out there, maybe even yourself or in your organization, if I were to take a look at your goals, and many of you are probably about to start or already starting the process to think about the goals for your team and yourself going into 2020, and I want to challenge you to have your goals for yourself and your team focus on the top level strategic objectives of the business. If your goals are implement a new applicant tracking system, reduce time to fill by 25%, reduce marketing spend on recruitment marketing, those are really tactics. That's like saying in accounting, we need to make sure that the books balance and that the vendors are paid on time. That's just stuff that we have to do. The strategic objectives are when the business needs to increase top-line revenue, improve shareholder value, increase quality, increase safety, whatever the top-level metrics are in your business, and that you and your team say, what is our role in making sure that we are able to increase top-line revenue as a business? Does that mean that some of that might be reducing expenses, but often it's not the expense reduction, but it's most often not expense reduction that's going to get us increased opportunities. What are we going to have to do different? A friend of mine, I'm in a mastermind group, and I love the way he kind of framed it up recently. There's a book out there, I think, and he also has a podcast by Grant Cardone called 10X Thinking. And instead of thinking about for your goals and objectives now, as I did for many years in the corporate world, and it's still very easy to do, well, you say, well, this year I made this much money in my business, and next year I want to make that much more. I want 10% more. Or this year I spoke at 50 events around the world, and I want to speak at 55 next year because we think, we'll increase it to improve it. But instead, what would happen if you said, if I made $100,000 this year and next year I want to make $1 million, what would I have to do different in order to make $1 million next year? Because that 10X thinking kind of mindset forces you to say, I'd have to do something radically different. I can't just speak 5 more times, or you can't just reduce spend with an external recruiter by $10,000 2 more times. You'd have to do something radically different. So what are the top level goals of the organization? And then how can you really change so that you can hit those? I like this quote from Sue Meisinger, who's a former CEO of SHRM, where she says basically for HR leaders and of course recruiting leaders as well, we have to take our sights above our individual roles. Again, really press your team and yourself to think about what are the top level goals of the business, and then how do I and my team help deliver on that. Remember, you're the most important employee in the business, dealing with the most important resource in the business. The leverage and the ability that you and your team have to make a difference for those top-level goals of the organization is huge. Make sure you're not playing small by saying things like, we're going to implement a new applicant tracking system and do these things. You may still do those things, but your goals need to be, how are we going to radically impact the business? The third challenge, I think, going into the future is that we need to along those same lines, are we really focused on solving problems? Are we focused on solving what's in front of us? The business problems are the things in the organization that are plentiful. You know, life is a problem. Your job exists because there are problems in the organization. So in some ways that's job security, right? But if life is problems and problems exist, are you making sure that of all the things you could be doing, that you are working on the most important problems in the business? How do you know what those are? If you can't identify those, and maybe you can't, even if you are very high up in the organization, a challenge I have for you is go back to your organization after you tell everybody how important you are and then win friends and influence people from that. Go back to the organization, and again, this is a great time as you're thinking about 2020 and setting yourself and your team up for success. Meet with the functional heads of every department in your organization if you can. Maybe you work in a 100,000 person company and that might be difficult. But the top person that you can get 10 minutes of their time. And with all of those people, I want you to ask, what are the top 3 challenges that you and your team, Mr. Marketing Person or CMO, what are the top 3 challenges that you and your team are facing that could potentially prevent you from hitting our business objectives in 2020 or the rest of this year? Fourth quarter is obviously big for most people. So that'd be great. Fourth quarter. What's going to potentially prevent you from hitting the sales goals? What's going to potentially prevent you from hitting the marketing goals? What's going to potentially prevent you from doing that? Now, here's a great recruiting tip. I was a recruiter for all of my years in HR, and then I spent some time in executive search, and one of my favorite tools to use in interviewing people is you always ask people to fill a list. It's never, what's your biggest weakness? What are your top 3 weaknesses? What are the top 3 problems that you're facing? Because their mind then goes to, I need to fill the list. Versus if you ask just an open-ended question, you often get a story. And you don't want to know the story. You want people to think critically. So get your leaders to think critically. What are the top 3 challenges that are facing you and your team with meeting the business objectives in the future? After you've done that with the functional heads of every department, you will likely hear common themes, and my guess is, I'm pretty certain from every person, some of those, if not all of the problems that they see that are potentially preventing them from success are people related. Remember, number 1 problem is human capital. Leadership people, talent, skills, they're going to say something like, I don't have enough people, I don't have the right people, my people need more training, we need to understand our systems better. They're all going to be some version of people related. Then if you are able to take that information back to your team, and you are able to not only help those business leaders solve those challenges, but actually be working on those problems, you are focused strategically on solving business problems, and you are building great relationships with your peers and the leaders in your organization at the same time. Most of those people are probably bonused on their ability to get success, right? You help people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. Next time you have difficulty getting a hiring manager to do something for you, you've helped their boss succeed in meeting the business objectives, they'll be able to have your back and help you get what you need. Which kind of leads me again to the 4th area, we have to influence change. We think about, particularly in large organizations, we have whole departments of people that are focused on change management. You know, we have an upcoming change management initiative, which is most often around a communication plan and making sure that people understand what's in it for them. All very important. But again, it's reactionary, even if you're planning ahead for change. You're planning ahead for what's going to happen. What you need to build and what your secret ingredient for you, the most important employee in the business, is your ability to influence people. Do people trust you? Do they come to you because they want your input? We know we need things from hiring managers. We know we need things from leaders in our organization in order to do our job. How high up are you on their priority list? And you may say, well, I'm pretty low because I'm not an executive in the organization, or I just need them to give me a time on their calendar to meet with this person. Back to, if Zig Ziglar said it, the great Zig Ziglar, if you help enough people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. So I'm not talking about quid pro quo kind of stuff. I'm talking about over time developing influence to the point where people trust you, they know that you have expertise in your area, and they know how critical your role is to helping them be successful to meet the needs of the business. A few years ago, again, I worked as an executive recruiter for 3.5 years, worked with a lot of CEOs and business teams to bring in top-level CHROs or HR leaders into their organization, recruiting leaders, VPs of talent, et cetera. And when I would get a role for a client, it was retained search, so would go out to the company and meet with the CEO and the executive team to ask them really important questions. A lot of those, again, list questions, give me 3 things. And I would ask them a question, what is the one thing that you want me to make sure when we hire a new CHRO or VP of talent into your organization that this person is able to do or has that either you didn't get in your last one or that you really, really want to make sure that we get that again for you with this person. So what is the one thing, the one skill, the one ability, whatever? And those CEOs, by and large, told me, I want this person to be able to make decisions. They need to have courage. They need to come to the table with their ideas. I am not the expert in human resources or talent acquisition. I've hired them to be that person. And too often, the executives in your company are frustrated because they don't hear you bringing forth your ideas. They don't hear you making decisions, and then if something goes wrong, having a reason why you at least made that decision and asking for forgiveness. What they tell me is they see people who sit in meetings and take notes. And then after the rest of the team maybe has argued about ideas and thrown out new things and tried to come up with the best decision through constructive conflict, and then someone comes up maybe from HR or recruiting and says, oh, by the way, we can't do that because we'll get sued, or we don't have the funds, or we don't have the people, or whatever. We're often seen as the people who are the business prevention unit, rather than the people who are throwing out ideas and getting muddy and getting dirty so that we come up with the best idea together. That's influence. When you are able to put an idea out on the table and allow people to attack it like it's red meat, and you are able to sit there and listen, for that's the best way for your idea to get better. The only way your idea is going to get better is if it's tested with your team and with the people in your organization. So when someone says that won't work, you say, tell me more. When someone says we can't do that because of this, this, and this, I'd love to hear more about why you think that. Can you share some data around that? Or maybe I can go get some data to show you why that won't be as big of a problem. One of your biggest friends is to say, well, let me get back to you. I'd like to go collect some data and get back with you. That's building influence. And this is my favorite quote probably of all time from Neil Morrison, who's a former CHRO level in the UK with Penguin Random House. And I share it in almost every presentation I do because when I read it on his blog, I remembered my days back in human resources and recruiting leadership where I was trying to get people to listen to me or to make sure that I was in a meeting. And I would say silly things like, you're in there talking about people. I should be in there. I'm the human resources person. How can you be having a meeting about, expanding the business or bringing up, because I need to know those things. The fact that I was having to shame people and to invite me into meetings should have been a clue for me, not for them. Why did they not want me in those meetings? Why were they not saying, oh, wait, guys, we need Jennifer in this meeting, not just because we're talking about people, but because we're talking about the business. So you want people to want you to be there. That's influence. If you're not getting a voice, if you're not getting your leaders to hear you, then the opportunity is there for you to start thinking about how you can develop influence. You have a critical role. Do you have the voice, and are they listening to you is all that matters. It's not your title. It's not your position on the organization chart. It's not how much money you make. It's, are you able to help people solve business problems, take advantage of opportunities, and meet the critical strategic needs of the business? So, know the business, think strategically, solve business problems, develop your influence. Those are the opportunities that I think will position all of us in the future of work, regardless of whether or not we have artificial intelligence or predictive analytics or big data or cognitive or all the things that we hear about in terms of what we think are the future of work. Robots taking our jobs. The robots will do a lot of the things when it comes to data and analysis of that data, but what they cannot bring to the table is empathy, decision making, looking out into the future and thinking about what's going to happen with the people that are involved. So if your role is really important in the organization because you have influence and impact over the people in the organization, again, that's not going to be taken by the robots. What are you going to be doing so that you are able to build your influence to help your organization achieve success? So I got 5 things I want you to think about as you kind of go back to your organization and really hopefully focus your sights on stepping into the importance of your role. First, I want you to shift your thinking. If you don't already think of yourself as a business leader and not a recruiting leader or an HR leader or a learning and development leader, that's your new focus. You are a business leader first who happens to have skills and expertise in recruiting or talent acquisition or learning and development or HR. You think on the business needs first, and then you think about how you and your team and your role can help deliver upon that. It may sound like semantics to you, but if you really shift your thinking and you help your team shift your thinking, it will change the way that you do your work. And you'll be seen as vitally important to the business, not just because you are working with talent, but because you are business focused. Second thing is I want you to focus on feeding your brain. If you're not already, I mean, we have a world of resources available to us online through blogs and podcasts and websites and LinkedIn's blog and, the information that you get from them as a customer. But are you really being strategic in what you consume? Reading is important for a lot of things, not just because you enjoy it or don't. I like to read, but I'm a bad book reader, so I actually set it as a goal every year to read books because I would rather play games on my phone or watch TV than read a book. But leaders are readers. You've heard that said before. There's actually a study out there that was done in a book that was written on it called Rich Habits. Look that up if you hadn't seen it or just look it up online. And the guy actually studied super successful people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and, some of the people that we think are some of the most successful people out there. And he also studied, back to data again, he studied people that maybe are not as successful as Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. And he tried to look for correlating success factors for people who we would consider to be successful or rich and the people that maybe aren't. And one of the top correlating success factors for those people that we would say are successful, one of the rich habits is they are readers. So even Warren Buffett sets aside 30 minutes a day to read. Now you might be like, well, I don't want to read books about recruiting or self-help or whatever. That's fine. Read Harry Potter. Read books about romance. Read books in general because there are studies that have been done that show you become a better communicator. You're able to see, if you're reading things like science fiction or fantasy, you're able to see the world differently when you maybe encounter a situation. So reading in general is going to help you be a better professional, and certainly staying current with what's going on in your profession and in your industry is going to be helpful. Number 3, intentionally connect. You guys are people. You're probably some of the most connected people out there, whether it's on LinkedIn or in your community or in your company. But how many of those people do you actually really get to know? And when I say get to know, I'm not talking about your friends or people that maybe you enjoy being around. I'm talking about like at this conference. Are you intent on maybe finding 2 or 3 people here that you didn't know before, that you're not just going to take their business card and connect with them on LinkedIn, but maybe when you're at a lunch discussion, you don't just say, hi, I'm Jennifer and I work at Unbridled Talent. What do? You say, hey, Bruce, nice to meet you at this conference. What's been your favorite session since you've been here? Bruce is going to say, Jennifer McClure's session. You really missed it. You weren't there, right? And you're going to say, tell me more. Tell me why. Those questions where you actually ask a question to open up, a question like, hey, you're here at the Talent Connect conference. Why did you come? What were you hoping to learn? What's the biggest challenge that you and your business maybe have overcome in the last year? Are you, the great interviewers of the world, actually asking people questions where you're able to find commonalities, you're able to learn something, and you're probably able to find 2 or 3 people that you not just want to connect on LinkedIn with, but maybe you want to stay in touch with, because they have a new way of looking at a problem or an opportunity than you had. You won't get those answers if you're just saying, hi, which hotel you're staying at and how was the party last night? Those are great questions as well, but ask some deeper questions. Intentionally connect with some of the people here. And then I want you to focus on, again, you have the opportunity to impact so many people in your role. You are in talent acquisition more than likely if you're here at this conference, and you're there when you make offers. How wonderful is it to make an offer to somebody and they are so excited because you've changed their world or they're getting to work for the company that they've always wanted to work for. And then, of course, there are the people that you call them up and you offer the job and they're like, hey, thanks, see you Monday. And you're like, what? We've all had those too, right? But if you also work in the broader kind of talent field, you know that you're also with people when they're at their worst moments. Maybe there are performance issues and they ultimately have to be fired or let go from the company, and you know they have a family or they're going through a difficult time. Or you may be dealing with somebody who's got a benefits challenge or a health crisis. We are with people in some of their most vulnerable and most joyful moments. And those are the opportunities to have impact. I worked in HR in the corporate world for over 20 years. I worked as a recruiter for 3.5. I've been 10 years out there helping others. And it just makes me feel all kinds of feels when someone, if I see somebody, and it's happened more than once, I see somebody out on the street in Cincinnati where I live that I've fired, and you're like, other side of the street, right? And then they come running over, they're like, Jennifer McClure, and I'm like, yes. And they say, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. And you're like, really? And I've had it happen more than once. They say, I want to thank you. And you're like, thank me? And they're like, yeah, you fired me, that was painful, but it turned my life around because I realized that I needed to make some changes, and the fact that you handled it with dignity and allowed me to exit the company without having the guards walk me out and, pick my stuff up in a box, those types of things really made a difference, and I'm in a much better place now. You've got stories of your own like that. You have the opportunity to have an impact on people. So I want you to focus on that impact, and I want you to be happy that you have the opportunity to make a difference in someone's lives, because you really do. And then finally, I want you to take the opportunity to really step out. What is it, especially as, again, you go into fourth quarter, often crunch time in companies, and you're planning for 2020. What are you going to do in the rest of this year? One thing that's going to help you grow as a professional, that's going to help you learn, that's going to be something different, to challenge you, to stretch you. There's nothing out there that you can point to in your career where there hasn't been a period of growth, where it wasn't uncomfortable and it wasn't something that was challenged to you or your team. So really stepping out and taking the opportunity to think differently. The word out there today is disrupt. How do we disrupt things? And people think, oh, disruption means whatever it means to you. To me, disruption means you're not satisfied with the status quo, even if the status quo is that things are fine. In fact, if things are fine, that's the best time to be thinking about how can we take it to the next level. Because if you keep things at fine, they eventually slide back, and you're so far behind all the other people who are out there innovating before you. So we don't have to be Google or Microsoft or Facebook, and maybe some of you work in those companies, but you can work in a company with 10 people or 100 people. What can you do different to change something for the better in your organization and for yourself and your career, both the rest of this year and certainly in 2020? So I believe the future of HR and talent acquisition is ready for people who are determined, who are curious, who are innovative and disruptive. You have the opportunity to make a huge difference in your organization just by virtue of the role that you have in the company and the fact that people are now and will continue to be the most important thing in terms of business success. So take advantage of that opportunity, and I hope that in the future of HR that you are one of the most disruptive and highly influential people in your organization, because we already know you're the most important, right? So thank you for coming in and spending time with me. We have 23 seconds for a question, which if you have one, I'm happy to answer, but I also know you probably want to get to that drink, and you're going to ask great questions at the happy hour, right? So thank you for coming and taking the time for this today. Appreciate it.